Hello and welcome everyone. I'll give you just a few seconds to come on in, then we'll get started. So yes, welcome to the third live chat in our series about the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships Program, also known as STPF. My name is Vanessa Furtado, and I'm a program manager here at STPF. This live chat series is an opportunity for you to ask STPF fellows your questions. We hope that through these chats, you'll see how the fellowship can impact policy and transform your career. So before we get started, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. To put today's session in context, we are hosting one chat each month during application season. We're glad you are here today and invite you to join us for the remaining 2 sessions. Each chat will focus on a unique aspect of the fellowship experience, and you'll get to hear from different STPF fellows at each. Today, we'll discuss how an STPF fellowship impacts a fellow's career trajectory and the range of motivations for pursuing a fellowship at any career stage. A quick reminder, in case you haven't heard, STPF is currently accepting applications through November 1st. If you're wondering if you're eligible to apply or if you're interested in an application interview, I encourage you to visit our application portal. You can find the link in our chat box to learn the ins and the outs of the application. For 2024, there are 4 program areas applicants can apply to: the executive, legislative, judicial, and unique for this cycle, the Roger Revelle Fellowship. You can apply to up to 2 of these program areas in a given year. Fellowships are a paid 1-year full-time commitment in Washington, D.C. For a sense of timing, someone who applies in 2024 will be considered for a position in the fellowship class that runs from September 2025 through August 2026. Now on to the purpose of today's session, to chat with former fellows. Please do ask questions. To do that, you will click the question box in your menu and type your question in. And if you like, you can indicate the person or people to whom your question is directed. And we'll get to as many questions as we can today. So now I'm happy to introduce to you our former fellows who are joining us today. Dr. Franklin Carrero Martinez joined the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in 2018, where he directs the Global Sustainability and Development and the Science and Technology for Sustainability program within the Division of Policy and Global Affairs. Prior to this appointment, he was the Acting Deputy Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary of State. Previously, Dr. Carrero Martinez held appointments as Associate Professor at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, Adjunct Professor at the UPR Medical Science Campus, and as a visiting scholar at Duke University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Japan's Institute of Genetics. Dr. Carrero Martinez started his career in science diplomacy and policy as the American Association for the Advancement of Science's Roger Revelle Fellowship in Global Stewardship. He served this prestigious fellowship with a joint appointment between the Office of the Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary of State and the National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Carrero Martinez holds a Bachelor's of Science in Biology with honors from UPR and a PhD in Cell and Developmental Neurobiology and a Certificate in Business Administration from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Next, we have Dr. Jordan West, who is a senior ecologist in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Research and Development, Integrated Climate Sciences Division. Her areas of expertise include wetland and coral reef ecology, climate change impacts and adaptation, resilience and threshold theory, translational science, and human-centered design. Dr. West's research focused on frameworks and methods for assessing the vulnerabilities of aquatic systems to climate change and developing climate-smart adaptation responses that can be integrated with program planning and structured decision-making processes. She works with the National Estuary Programs on vulnerability assessment frameworks and resilience-based management of coastal wetlands, and with the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force on climate change adaptation methods for coral reef restoration and protection. Dr. West has been a regular contributor to national climate assessments of the interagency U.S. Global Change Research Program, most recently serving as agency chapter lead for the Ecosystems chapter of the 5th NCA. And Jordan, please feel free to turn on your camera so people can see you. And finally, we have Mr. Terrence Mosley, who is the Senior Advisor for Diversity in STEM for the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, also known as EERE. He is one of EERE's leaders in ensuring that diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility principles are woven into EERE activities, programs, and engagement. He is focused on ensuring broad diversity in STEM program development, R&D engagement, and recruitment programs that will expose more underrepresented minorities to fast-growing clean energy career fields. His current efforts include finding ways of lowering barriers to entry for HBCUs and other MSIs, as well as for other minority businesses through policy and program initiatives that will result in higher participation levels within the Department of Energy R&D funding assistance and procurement programs. Prior to DOE, he has served 18 years in various engineering and management roles for General Motors and Delphi Automotive Systems. Originally from Jackson, Mississippi, Mr. Mosley received his BS in mechanical engineering, sorry, someone just got onto my notes, from Southern University at Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology. And I know, Mr. Mosley, we were having some issues with your camera. Are you able to turn it on, or are we still just getting your sound? Well, hopefully if Terrence is here, you can at least unmute yourself and join in. Oh, we can, I'm sorry. Let me see if we can unmute him here. Give us 1 second.
Yes, now, thank you. You unmuted me. You had to unmute me.
Great, great. Well, wonderful. I'm so sorry we can't see you, Terrence, but so happy that we can hear you.
Yes, no, I apologize. The camera is not cooperating today.
No problem. No problem at all. So I just want to thank you all again so much for being here today. And before I go to the questions from the audience, I'm going to kick it off with one to start. And so if you could each think about what your motivation or inspiration was for pursuing the policy fellowship at whatever point in your career that you pursued it, and to share it with all of us. So Jordan, I would love it if you could start it off. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. You're still muted. You can just make sure Jordan is unmuted.
There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I came into the fellowship, you know, coming from a very traditional academic training background. I was in the section of ecology and evolutionary biology at Cornell for my PhD work. And I wasn't really offered very many alternate paths because the end all and be all was, you know, considered to be to get a professorship at an institution like Cornell. But I found that I was really interested, especially, you know, this was a number of years ago now. So with the growing need for a conservation angle and more applied use of our work. And so after school, I did a postdoc. That was fine. And then I did a year as an assistant professor at a small university on the West Coast. And I just wasn't, it just wasn't a good fit. And I wasn't finding what I wanted, although I wasn't sure what that was. And it just so happened that one of my friends, a fellow grad student from Cornell, had a AAAS fellowship. And I basically called and was talking to him, and he told me about it. So I, with very little short notice, banged out a couple applications. And it turned out to be exactly what I was looking for, an opportunity to use highly technical skills and to apply, you know, my strengths, but in an area that was much more collaborative and bent toward informing decisions. So that's how I came into it and how I decided to go in that direction, and it turned out to be just right.
That's wonderful. Franklin, we'll go to you next, and then Terrence.
So for me, at the time I was a tenured professor at the University of Puerto Rico. Back in 2010, the students went on a strike. They closed the university, and that summer I closed my lab. I couldn't go in, and I spent time as a visiting professor at MIT Brain Department Institute and in the biology department. And one of the things that I remember the chair of the department telling me was that things look pretty bad and that I needed to do something else. And I told him I'm doing what I was trying to do. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I agree with him that things look difficult. At the time, the university was put in suspension from federal funding and has lost accreditation. So I decided to explore what other things were out there. And I came across the fellowship website. I thought it was interesting. And as Jordan did, I, in a very short amount of time, put together an application. I think I had less than a month between finding out what policy fellowship was and submitting the application. So I was focused on a fellowship or something that would get me to a place where I would apply my expertise, my knowledge and experience, but that I would not traditionally be able to go to. So as a professor in the field that was neuroscience, I could have gone to NSF, I could have gone to NIH, but I wanted a fellowship experience in another part of government that I would not be able to get to, or traditionally would not be able to get to. And I wanted to explore that. That's how I ended up at the State Department and the National Academies at the time. So I had the, I guess, the luxury or mistake, depending on who you ask, of having 2 appointments simultaneously, because as we know, it's never 50-50. It was like 75-75 or maybe even more. And that's how I ended up with this appointment between government and the academies.
Thank you. Definitely might poke more into that as the panel goes on. Finally, Terrence, are you able to share?
Yes, you know, the funny thing about it, Vanessa, as I'm thinking about it, this panel might be setting a bad precedent because I have a lot in common with the other two with how we applied, because I think I probably applied. I may have had a little bit more time than Jordan and Franklin mentioned, but I think I did it within about 2 months, and you know, really had to work to put things together and get it in. But how I got there was actually kind of funny, because I am a little bit of an oddball compared to a lot of the people that come into the program, is that I am not from academia, and I was in industry. I had been well into my career in industry, and had a lot of exposure with manufacturing and engineering, and even construction in my background. And the funny part is that I actually used to participate with a lot of NSF program reviews or panel reviews. And as I got to know a lot of program managers up there and a lot of people at NSF, I was introduced to the program through them, actually, because NSF has supported a lot of fellows in the past, and they really had informed me about the process and about the program. And because of where I was, the similarity that I have to Franklin is that not like, as he mentioned, having a lab that was, you know, kind of looking downward a little bit, or maybe not in as great a shape where he needed to make some provisions. We were kind of in the same place with my company at the time, where we were doing a lot of offshoring and moving plants and facilities out of the country. And so we were either looking at, you know, needing to you know, maybe move to other locations, or making a move that I really didn't think that we'd be that happy with. And so at the time, the applying to the fellowship really brought a great alternative, something different, kind of a change of pace for a career option. And it actually it ended up being exactly that. And so little did I know that when I went through the process and ended up at DOE, that we'd be here, you know, 3, 4, 5 years later, after going through the process of being a AAAS fellow with them. So that was kind of my process, a little bit different coming from industry and not from academia, but you know, we've ended up at the same place.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for those answers. And just to follow up quickly, you know, both, you know, Franklin, you did the Revelle Fellowship, Jordan, you did the Revell and the executive branch, and Terrence, you did the executive branch fellowship. I'm wondering if you each could speak to why you chose the program areas that you applied to, or in Jordan's case, the order of which you chose to apply to 2 fellowship programs. And actually, maybe Terrence, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, for me, it was a little easier because, like I said, I was limited to some access to the programs because every program doesn't necessarily accept master's level, but the executive branch did, and I thought it was a really a good fit for what I was looking for at the time. So that was really the thinking behind that, is just making sure that it was a program that accepted master's candidates and not necessarily PhD candidates.
Great, thank you. And then Franklin, will go to you, and then Jordan, what about the Revell Fellowship stood out, or why did you apply for that program?
So I applied for both the regular fellowship and the AAAS, and at the time I got both. But I decided to do the Revell because of not only the prestige associated with that particular track at the time. I know that the fellowship has been reorganized since, but also the flexibility. I remember at the time that, given the way that the fellowship is funded, I had the opportunity to craft my own appointment in a way. And that's how I ended up doing this half-time at the academies and half-time at the Department of State. The rationale for me at the time was that it would allow me like a transition period between being in academia and serving in government. And that portion of the fellowship at the National Academy of Sciences served that. I had a lot of colleagues here at the academies, which I'm now employed by the academies, that helped me bridge that gap and help me make that transition easier between what's happening or what was happening in the lab and the understanding of the policy world. So that was essentially the main reason. Then for the second year, then I did stay for full time at the State Department in the Science Advisor's Office.
Thank you. And Jordan?
Yeah, so hey, like I applied to 2 because I didn't know if I would get both of them. So I picked the 2 things that fit me the best. I knew that the Revell would be like Franklin said, full flexibility and an international component, but it was brand new. It was only the 2nd Revell Fellowship, and it was, being it was being publicized as very elite. So I didn't know if I would be competitive. I didn't know who else was applying. So it made great sense to look at the executive branch, where there were several agencies that I could work at, and I just applied to both of them. And I had the Revell interview first, and I was offered it. And so I didn't go any further because I knew that it was so unique, and that it would, like I said, I could pick something outside of the federal government, which I did, an international NGO that allowed me to get experience on my topic, which at the time, with coral reefs being the poster child for coral bleaching and climate change, it was a very emerging topic, and it was perfect for this global stewardship, fellowship. So it was a perfect fit, and it allowed me to be involved with the International Coral Reef Initiative, the Convention on Biological Diversity, things like that, that, like the others have said, like, you're not going to get that opportunity, easily through other things. But I was also collaborating with colleagues in the State Department who represented at the Convention on Biological Diversity. So I got to have that contact with the federal government as well, people at NOAA as well as state. And so since the Revell Fellowship, the only drawback there was it was only a year. Then I just turned around and did another one. I did the executive fellowship and sort of said, boy, I've started a lot of new things. I have a lot of irons in the fire. I want to keep going. And this time I want to do it from the perspective of the federal government, so that, like, from an international perspective down, and from the federal government up in terms of the broadness, that was my argument. So I just did it in that order.
Wonderful. Thank you all. All right, going to a question from the audience. During the fellowship, did you directly apply your scientific expertise to the role? Or did you learn about other fields and also apply skills from your academic training? And Terrence, please feel free, if you want to answer, just start talking and we will give you the floor.
No problem. Yeah, I would say for sure, but you know, at the section of my career that I was in, though, it was really more about some of the more general knowledge and networking that I had done over the years. A lot of the items that I work on, I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer by background, but when you a lot of the times when you're going through the interview process and when you land where you land, it's because of specific knowledge that you might have, or you know, ability to bring in some of your previous background to what they're looking for. And so, you know, I would say it was more about probably my breadth of knowledge at the time, rather than a specific topic area. And I still think that's true today, is that a lot of the programs that I had worked with and brought into existence over the years are things that I brought to the federal government with me, and actually brought it through the fellowship. And so a lot of the things that I had initiated at this point that we do at DOE are things that I brought. Some things I brought with me from previous experience, some new ideas that I had that I wanted to implement that, you know, that I was able to kind of utilize a lot of past experience to put together. And so, yeah, so I think you use a lot of elements of all of your background. I mean, and that's one of the great things about the fellowship, is that you really can truly bring your whole self to the position, and really bring out some of the things that you're passionate about and some of the things that you really want to integrate into policy to actually help a lot of people. And so, you know, I liked what Jordan said about kind of her background as far as wanting to have an effect from the federal side. I think that's where a lot of us end up. A lot of us aren't aware of some of the great initiatives and great things going on within the federal space. And once you find out that you can have an effect and kind of bring your previous backgrounds and you know, professional experiences to the table, I think that that's really exciting to a lot of us, to be able to have a really solid effect on policy that can affect a lot of people for, you know, for quite a few years.
Great. Jordan, Franklin, feel free to add.
Oh, I'll just say that, yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed in both fellowships was the definitely the zooming in on the things that I could bring expertise to, where I could recognize a place where I could actually fill a need and know that I was contributing. But then it was some effort or some application or some area that was a big stretch of learning for me. So in the Revell Fellowship, I definitely brought my PhD is in coral reef ecology, but moving into the climate assessment space, climatology, linking climate to coral bleaching, and then working at the level of these international institutions like the Convention on Biological Diversity, where you're working with the State Department to get messages that then, you know, you listen to these messages come out of the mouths of like representatives at the CBD, and you know, as was just pointed out, like these things can have a big effect on what happens. And then from the federal side, you know, I brought a lot of the coral reef work over, but then I had to branch out much broader for the work that EPA does into other systems like wetlands, watersheds, and then much more broadly into national climate assessments and how you organize and run huge multidisciplinary projects. So I found myself on a steep learning curve and really stretching to become a much more broad scientist who thinks broadly about the meaning of the work. And that's really what the Science and Technology Policy Fellowships are. It's working at the interface of science and policy, where you're using your science skills and to make a difference to inform policy. And that is really, really rewarding and fun.
I don't have much to add to what Terrence and Jordan said. It's exactly the same, but one thing in particular, so at some point, convoluted story, but I ended up in Mexico City as the acting science attaché at the embassy. And at some point, someone had the brilliant idea of stealing radioactive materials. I get a call from the embassy staff, the ambassador staff, and says, we need your help. And I said, I'm not a chemist of the sort that you would need. Like, you're the scientist, you need to figure it out. So I had colleagues that were in the field, so I was able to pick up the phone, talk to him, and get a better understanding of the kind of questions that I needed to ask from the Mexican authorities to figure out a response. So that is something that I think it's unique. It's not necessarily your deep technical, scientific, or engineering skill set, but it's the network that you bring to help advise or help put something together. With that knowledge, then I was able to figure out and talk to the Mexican government, the US government, the embassy staff, and figure out a plan of how to deal with that emergency. But as a neuroscientist, I was not dealing with any radioactive materials of that sort, but was able to figure it out. So that's another skill set that I know when people are thinking about whether I would be a fit for the fellowship, that's something that you should consider. It's the network, is your peers, is your professors, and others that you bring to bear as part of the fellowship.
That's great. And actually your answer, Franklin, it almost, it touches on this next question we have. So that might have partly answered it, but maybe we can dig in a little bit more. It's long, I'm trying to see if they want you to talk about how your disciplines can show up in different placements. And so this person's PhD and postdoctoral training are primarily in psychology and oncology, but they're interested in pursuing a role in the State Department. Are fellowship opportunities within the State Department predominantly geared towards individuals with STEM backgrounds, or is there room for candidates from diverse academic disciplines like mine?
So in my case, during my placement at the State Department, the Obama administration launched the BRAIN initiative. So I was involved in helping some of the international aspect of that initiative as well. So there I had an opportunity to apply my knowledge there. Another time, I don't think they really appreciate it, but I think we were hosting a Brazilian delegation, and they asked, why would the State Department have a neuroscientist in staff? And I jokingly said that my job was to erase their memories as they left the building. I'm not sure that they found it funny the way they reacted, but I guess that was the second opportunity I had to use my expertise. In reality, as Jordan and Terrence said, you don't get to use your deep expertise in a non-technical agency like the State Department. You become more of a generalist. And that's a skill that's valued there, and some similar in other agencies as well. But you don't get to use your technical expertise every day.
Terrence, you don't have to add anything.
Vanessa,
okay. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. No. If I can follow up. Well, first I might need to bring Franklin to some meetings with me so he can help erase some people's minds when we leave. But,
I'll be happy to help.
Anyway, okay. All right. I'll call you. I'll call you afterwards. But anyway, I think one of the key things that the reason I wanted to chime in was because the person that asked the question, Vanessa, the funny thing is that there is a huge space, at least within DOE, and I think it's kind of the same across a lot of agencies, where we have been working to expand social science work. So when you talk about the fact that is it just STEM dominated and what have you, yeah, I would probably say a large majority of the people that come in that are recruited are some sort of engineering or some kind of background, at least for us within clean energy. But we do have quite a few people that are working kind of more on the social science side of things, because the realization is there now that in order for us to implement a lot of the clean energy technologies that we're trying to get out, that you have to work with consumer demand and transition, and you have to work with those those kinds of elements, and you have to research that to be able to figure out how best to make the clean energy transition happen. So I would highly encourage you, if you're in a field like whether it's psychology, I think you said psychology, Vanessa, but
Yeah.
whichever of the fields like that, I think there's a lot of room for people in those areas right now because of the uptick in social science research happening. And we're doing some of that in partnership with like the national academies and with other agencies. But I would just highly encourage you, if you are in those fields, make sure to
Terrence, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I
if
think
you go in for interviews with different agencies, is to really reach out and see and not know about it.
we can hear you now. I'm so sorry. I think you kind of got stuck in the slow
Oh, okay.
machine, but you seem to be back. So
Yes, no, I heard a little blip, and I didn't realize it. But no, what I was just saying though, as far as like that psychology person and others that might be in social science fields or not field that you're in, like engineering per se, there is a lot of room for growth in that area within DOE and a lot of other agencies are increasing the amount of social science research they're doing now. So I would highly recommend, if you're going through the interview process, to make sure to inquire on the types of social science work that are going on within agencies, because you may be pleasantly surprised with what you find out, and you may be a perfect fit for groups that are looking for that expertise.
Wonderful. Thanks, Terrence.
Yeah, I would just add that, it really is, depends on what you want to do. With the Revell, you can craft whatever you want to do, whether it's some people really want to get outside of their original training into something different. And some people really want to apply their training. And as both of these guys has already said, there's opportunities for that. But with the Revell, you craft whatever you want. Yes, if you go to State Department, you're going to be more putting out fires and you're going to be a generalist. But, I was smiling because they're just excited to have really smart people who know how to problem solve. So like in that sense, it doesn't even matter. Like if you have reached a PhD level of training, you know how to do research. Franklin's example of what he had to do, you know how to go figure things out. And that's actually really rare. And you're a free resource coming in, and they're just like so excited to have, more warm bodies, and not just warm bodies, but like capable people. And then if you're in an executive fellowship like with the EPA, then there's more opportunities to apply your specific, say, environmental science. And again, for the psychology side, just totally agree. We just stood up a new integrated climate sciences division, and its purpose is to integrate the climate and social sciences. And we are staffing up on social scientists. And there are these areas that are just somewhat hidden or emergent throughout the agencies, where somebody with a psychology degree could really come in and apply that in a new way, like in these emerging areas like climate trauma and climate grief. Like they're starting to get studied. And so the fellowships are a way where you can find a placement, and it might not seem like a perfect fit at first, but you can make your way to a perfect fit, or you can create, by bringing that skill set in, you can create something new in that environment, and where they realize that your specific skill set could be really useful. So you have that opportunity to create your own space as well. So there's a million different paths depending on whether you want to be more general or stick with your area of expertise.
Wonderful. Thank you all for those answers.
And Jordan,
go ahead, Terrence.
Well, Jordan, I just wanted to tie on to what she said. I mean, just to show you the different variety of people that we're bringing in now. I just met a few anthropologists that we just hired, because they're expanding work so much in that social science space. There's room for everybody. I think I have met people within every imaginable of science field that you could think of. But like I said, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at how your expertise might come into play.
Thank you, Terrence. This next question is perfect for the panelists that we have on today's webinar, since the two of you who did the Revelle Fellowship, just by nature of those eligible to apply, have to be further along in your career. And Terrence, you came to us after nearly 20 years working in industry. And so this person wants to know, can you talk about the advantages or disadvantages of doing the fellowship at a mid-career stage? I'm 15 years since getting my PhD.
I have a comment about that. There were, quite a few fellows. So I was within 5 years of my degree, but there were several fellows in my cohort that were on sabbaticals, doing it on a sabbatical. And so there's both an advantage and a disadvantage because folks at that stage have more experience under their belt, and a higher level of maturity and life experience. But the only pitfall is they have to be willing to be a little humble because they're coming into this new environment. And one of the things that I just had a blast with that I actually enjoyed was you don't know anything. You do not know what is going on when you arrive at an agency. Everybody's talking in acronyms in this alphabet soup. You can't even understand every third word in their sentences. And you have to sort of be willing to say, I might be a big egghead in my little discipline, right? But I don't know anything. And there's a great deal of freedom and fun in that, because then you can just go around and say to people, can you teach me and explain? And what in our group, we received many fellows through time in the group I ended up in. And we would always say, take your time and enjoy getting your bearings and figuring out the lay of the land. No one is expecting you to hit the ground running. And that's the one pitfall, is that sometimes the more mature folks, they feel like they're supposed to instantly hit the ground running and know everything, because for a long time, we train ourselves in this area, and then you have experience and you do know everything about your institution and your discipline. So there can be pros and cons, but I actually don't see any con for someone further along, as long as they have that understanding, that attitude, right? It's like you're back in school for the first time, which is actually, as long as it doesn't bother you to know that you're not the expert anymore, it's really fun.
Franklin or Terrence?
So I would say it really depends what you want to do. So if you're looking to change careers, or if you're planning to go back, I think that informs whether it's advantageous or not. If you go back, what I've seen people, it's that they have a better understanding of what policy is, and they can train their students better or direct students instead of forcing some of them to become like them. So some may say you may be a good fit for a fellowship, or you may explore, I don't know, a congressional liaison office within your professional society, or maybe volunteer with the local representative and gain that exposure. So that could be transformational for this person's career. Whether he or she goes back, it will have an impact on their students. But if you decide to stay, or if you think of the fellowship as a way to transition away from academia, then of course there's different sets of benefits. In either scenario, I would then strongly encourage them to consider that next step and decide where do you want to sit, or where do you want to do the fellowship or the placement. That, I think, it's very important. Like I said, in my case, I was not sure the first year when I did the Revelle whether I was going to go back to academia or stay. So that transitional year I wanted to do in an agency where I would not normally be able to go to, given where I was doing before. So I think it's critical. And you also, with given a lot of pressure from the department, if you're taking a sabbatical year and all of that should play into your or his or her consideration. And most importantly, I think you have to be honest. Some people just get fed up with academia, grants, publishing, and all of that. If you're getting away from that, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure that then your placement provides a launching pad to the next stage or the next chapter in your career.
Yeah, and Vanessa, I think I would follow up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think Franklin was headed, I mean, I love the direction he was headed, and I chime in with that 100%. That, like, for me, it was a little different because, like I said, I think I was at a career transition point anyway, where I was already kind of considering what else might be out there. And having never worked in government before, it was something that just opened up a whole new world. So, being mid-career, whether you're in academia or in from industry, I would tell you that it's a great move regardless. And the part that Franklin mentioned that's key for academia is that it could open up a whole new world of realization of maybe, how to put in, better proposals, how to better connect your grad students with, with government agencies and the opportunities that are there. I mean, it opens up so many doors as far as just your network that, the biggest thing for you to think about is, as Franklin mentioned, kind of what your next step is. If you know that you just want to get a year experience and take a sabbatical, and then you're going back to teach afterwards, then that's one thing. But if you are even curious or considering a potential career change, maybe even down the road, it can be good for that as well, because you, like I said, you kind of discover this whole new world and new area where your knowledge and your expertise are really needed. And so I just think it's a good thing for early career people. But I will tell you, I mean, being like really kind of a little past the midway point of my career, it really opened up a whole new world for me. And I think it's great at any point, as long as you kind of are thinking about where you want to go next. If you only have a year to take, and you're just trying to get some experience in, and go, do something different for a year, then that's great. But if you are thinking about potential things that you can do in your future, and as always happens when you get into some of these positions, you know you can you can develop new interests that you didn't know you had when you first started. And it may end up leading to you being interested in a in a new space, later on in your career, or even at this point, now.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for those answers. And again, it's almost tying into this next question I'm going to ask from an applicant or a potential applicant. These fellowships are only 1 year, which makes me nervous about potentially leaving my current role for something so temporary. Did you find that you were able to identify possibilities and move into your next role following the fellowship easily based on the network built up with your placement?
I will quickly answer that one to say, anything within the federal government is not easy as far as hiring in. So if it's something that you're, it's for most of us, like at least for me, I know the first year is highly enjoyable, because you're not necessarily like, if you're planning. I was totally open to staying 2 years, and I knew I was totally open to renewing and staying 2 years. So I knew once I had finished my first 6 months, I think I was like, this is, I'm really enjoying this. And I know that, my family and I could do the second year. And we had a really young son at the time, and so all we were concerned about with him was like preschool and what have you. And it wasn't the decisions weren't quite as hard family wise at the time. And so for me, I think I knew after about the first 6 months that, yes, I think I could pursue something here. But the the federal process is so funny, though, to find something uh, that you really like in comparison to what you're doing as a fellow. You still have to find the right fit, the right office, the right agency, trying to find out like what's the right opening for me to come in if I'm going to stay. And and even if you find a position or two that you really like, and your networks kind of help you find, the federal hiring process, it can take a while depending on the agency. I think DOE has worked really hard to get their processes down to where, from start to finish, you might be able to get in the door and, within 100 days. It used to be 200 days. I've heard nightmare stories about a lot of people transitioning over to permanent positions, but the earlier you start investigating, the better. And the earlier that you start planning, if you're planning on transitioning, the earlier you start, the better. And I think Jordan mentioned it as well, is like there's a lot of organizations that we work with outside of the federal government, whether it's, non-governmental organizations or, community groups, nonprofits, whatever. There's a lot of networking to do, a lot of networking opportunities and a lot of opportunities out there. So a lot of it is up to you and how active you are, kind of how you're really trying to use the opportunity to the best of your ability to get to the next opportunity for you. So that's kind of the quick 2 cents I would give on that. I would warn anybody that, the federal hiring process can be, it can be frustrating at times. And so you just want to know that going in ahead of time. And, before you, totally leave a situation that might be solid for you now, you just really have to think about it and just say, hey, am I willing to, make the leap? Am I ready to make the leap, and am I really ready to do this now, or do I just want to kind of see if I can take a break and then come back to it after 1 year? So that's kind of the answer that I would try to, or the advice I would try to tell you on that one.
So in my case, I was having a blast, right away. So I knew that I got deeply into some projects, and I knew I wanted to keep doing that kind of work. And so, I was coming off of not being satisfied with my previous, so I knew I wasn't going to go back. So there is a little bit of a unmoored state that you're in, and it can feel a little risky. But in my case, I looked for how can I keep doing this work, because I'm really enjoying it. And so then that tells you, I had 2 choices. One was to do another AAAS fellowship if I could con AAAS into giving me another one, because I knew that I had made these agency contacts. And then, as Terrence just said, I was also working closely with the World Conservation Union, the International Conservation, the European name is IUCN, World Conservation Union. And then I was working closely with people from the Nature Conservancy. So my other path would have been to try to look at an NGO. And so I went for the fellowship first, because that's would give me 2 more years to figure things out, of having a blast and not really being under that pressure. And luckily that worked out for me. But I think my hope was, I was definitely trying to build that networking and build a reputation, working directly in partnership with people from other agencies, and from NGOs. And I think I would have just if the fellowships hadn't been due and been determined, close enough to me knowing that I got one, I would have just gone into high gear and been looking for something with an NGO. So luckily it worked out. But oh, and the other thing, talking about long, it can take a long time to get onto a federal, get an FTE with the federal government. In my case, I came in as a fellow. Then I said, I don't want to leave. And so they said, well, we can give you a postdoc. So I had to kind of do my time for several years as a postdoc until a slot opened, because the hiring ceilings are sometimes a problem. So I, again, was very lucky. I was able to keep doing the work I wanted to do, and until finally there was an opening. So there's a lot of ways it can work out, and you might have to move around a little bit, change offices, find your way. But there are also pathways fellowships for some of the federal agencies so there are different types of ways you can kind of keep extending fellowships if you want to, until you can get to a place where you can get permanent. But it's true, it can take a little while.
We're
Hey,
getting
Jordan,
close to the
that's a great.
time. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Terrence. I just wanted to say we are actually coming up
yes.
close to time. So I just wanted to give Franklin, I didn't know if you had a quick anything you wanted to add
Oh,
to
no,
what Jordan and Terrence said?
very quick. It was just about the fellowships. We do have ORISE fellowships that are offered, and that's another vehicle that I tell a lot of people about because it can allow you to re-up for up to 5 years instead of just 1 or 2 years. And so a lot of people do that until they can connect with a FTE. So I just wanted to throw that in right quick.
Thanks, Terrence.
I would just add that then if the intention is to stay or you think you're taking a risk, then make sure that your placement it's in an office that would give you exposure, visibility, and opening some doors for you. Don't go to an office where you're going to be sitting in the back desk where no one will get to see your work. Because if that's important to be positioned for a transition, then maximize your chances.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. As I said, we are coming up to the hour. So I have one more question for all of you. It'll be quick answer time. But for each of you, what was the most surprising way that your time as a fellow impacted your career trajectory or opportunities? Terrence, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, it was such a pleasant surprise because it so directly impacted my career. A lot of the work that I did as a fellow is what generated a lot of interest in me in staying, and a lot of the projects that I did to help us diversify our pipelines and programs that I had developed or brought into DOE at the time. They directly led to my position that I'm in now because instead of just doing it for one office, they wanted me to be able to do it, instead of just doing it for one program office, it directly led to me being able to do it for an entire office at DOE, which I'm extremely proud of and happy about, and have really had a ball starting up a whole new portfolio that was based on a lot of the work that I did as a fellow. So, I'm kind of like Jordan. I truly enjoyed my time as a fellow and had a blast, but I was able to really utilize my past experiences, my ideas, my passions, and then put that together into a full-time position, that I hold today. And so it's just I can't tell you enough how it directly impacted my career, what I'm doing now.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll do Franklin and then end with Jordan.
So for me, it was the realization that a lot of the things that I was doing when I was in academia directly translate to what I did during the fellowship. Writing a memo to the Secretary of State, it's maybe equivalent to writing an abstract for a conference. If you have 500 words to state a problem, the potential solution, and the outcome. And there's a lot of different things that you do in academia, whether in your PhD, your postdoc, or as a professor, that are directly translatable. Once I realized that, then things became very easy. I ended up doing negotiations at the UN, working with difficult partners in Pakistan, working in Mexico, doing a lot of other things in the sustainability space that I would have never ever thought that I would be able to do. So it opens a lot of doors, but then surprisingly, a lot of those things I have already done as a faculty member.
Thank you. Jordan?
For me, I'll say that the biggest kind of revelation was that there was this whole world of applied science and problem solving that I had never been trained on or understood. And I was able to use whole skill sets of my natural skills and personality in a completely different way that was still very scientific, but was just so much more well-rounded for me, of like multidisciplinary, very collective efforts to move things forward, just a completely different kind of social construct for solving problems with science. And that was kind of a revelation for me, and it fit my skill set and personality better. And for me, it was just like this huge, like, oh, phew, thank goodness, like, because I was trying to figure out, where I could make the biggest difference with both my science and, my more collaborative, side of my personality. So that was a revelation.
Wonderful. Well, Jordan, Terrence, and Franklin, thank you so much for sharing, all of your expertise with us all this past hour. We are now going to wrap up. I want to thank all of you participants for listening to today's chat and for asking such great questions. The STPF application is open now through November 1st. We'll send you all a recording of this conversation in the coming days, along with resources to support your STPF application. The next chat in our series will take place on September 17th. The topic will be the STPF application and interview, advice and walkthrough. If we couldn't get to your question today, please email us at fellowships@AAAS.org as seen on your screen to continue the conversation there. So thanks again, enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Good luck.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.